Story 1. Today's story is about something we've all done, booking an Airbnb. But let me just say, after what happened to me, I'm sticking to hotels from now on. This one still keeps me up at night, so grab a drink, settle in, and let me tell you about the Airbnb with no checkout. This happened last summer. My friends and I decided to rent an Airbnb for a weekend getaway in this tiny, picturesque town. It was the kind of place with cobblestone streets, little bakeries, and no chain stores in sight. The Airbnb itself was a cozy little cottage on the edge of town, surrounded by woods. It looked perfect in the photos, rustic, charming, and secluded. Exactly what we were looking for. When we arrived, the host wasn't there to greet us, but they left a key in the lockbox and a note that said, "Welcome, make yourselves at home." The cottage was beautiful inside. Antique furniture, a big stone fireplace, and these old black and white photos hanging on the walls. The photos creeped me out a little, to be honest. They were of people who didn't look happy. You know how in old photos people sometimes have that blank stare? These felt different. Like they were staring at me, not the camera. The first night was fine. We cooked dinner, played board games, and hung out. But around midnight, things started getting weird. My friend Sarah went to the kitchen to grab a drink and came back pale as a sheet. She said she saw a shadow move across the room, but when she turned the lights on, there was no one there. We all laughed it off, saying she was just spooking herself out. The next morning, I woke up early and went outside to get some fresh air. That's when I noticed something strange. The woods around the house were completely silent. No birds, no bugs, nothing. Just this eerie, heavy quiet. It gave me the creeps, so I went back inside. Later that day, things started escalating. The power flickered on and off randomly, even though the weather was fine. Doors we knew we'd closed were suddenly open. At one point, Sarah swore she heard whispering coming from one of the bedrooms, but when we checked, no one was there. That night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. I thought it was one of my friends, so I called out, "Who's there?" No answer. I grabbed my phone for light and peeked out of my room. The hallway was empty, but I could still hear the footsteps. They were heading toward the living room. I woke everyone up, and we decided we'd had enough. We packed our stuff and were ready to leave, but when we got to the front door, it wouldn't open. The lock wouldn't budge, no matter how hard we tried. Even the windows wouldn't open. It was like the house didn't want us to leave. That's when we heard it. A soft, rhythmic knocking. It was coming from inside one of the bedrooms. We stood frozen, staring at the closed door. None of us wanted to open it, but we couldn't just stand there. I mustered up all my courage, grabbed a fireplace poker, and opened the door. The room was empty, except for one thing. The mirror on the wall had words written on it, like they were scrawled in condensation. "You can't leave." We spent the rest of the night huddled together in the living room, too scared to sleep. At sunrise, the front door finally unlocked on its own. We bolted out of there and didn't look back. When we told the host what happened, they acted surprised, but I could tell they knew something. Later, we found out the house had a reputation. Guests reported strange experiences, but the reviews were always taken down. So, yeah, if an Airbnb seems too good to be true, maybe think twice before booking. You might not get to leave. Story 2. This story is about a road trip gone wrong in ways I still can't explain. It's about a place that shouldn't exist, and if you ever stumble across it, just keep driving. Trust me. So, let's get into it. This happened a few months ago. I was driving cross-country for a job interview, taking back roads because I thought it would be faster and more scenic. It was one of those long, lonely stretches of road where you can go miles without seeing another car. Late in the afternoon, my gas light came on. I figured I'd pull into the next town to fill up, but the miles kept ticking by and there was nothing but trees and empty road. Just as I started to panic, I saw a sign that said, "Welcome to Ashwood." A couple of miles later, I drove into this tiny town. It looked straight out of the 1950s. Small brick buildings, an old-fashioned diner, and a gas station with one pump. Relieved, I pulled into the gas station and got out to fill up. That's when I noticed something strange. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on me, and the town was completely silent. No birds, no cars, not even the hum of electricity, just this oppressive, unnatural quiet. Still, I was desperate, so I started pumping gas. That's when I saw someone watching me from the diner across the street. It was a man, standing completely still, staring at me through the window. I waved, but he didn't move. Feeling uneasy, I finished pumping and went inside to pay. The station attendant looked normal enough, an older guy with a weathered face. But when I handed him my card, he shook his head and said, "Cash only." I was annoyed, but handed him some cash. As he counted it, I asked, "So, how far is it to the highway?" He stopped counting, looked up at me and said, "There's no highway." I laughed nervously. "What do you mean? I just need to get back on Route 17. He stared at me for a long moment before saying, "You should leave before dark." That was enough for me. I hurried back to my car, but when I turned onto the main road, I saw something that made my stomach drop. The man from the diner was now standing in the middle of the street, staring at my car. And he wasn't alone. More people had come out of the buildings, men, women, even children, all standing perfectly still, all staring at me. I floored it, swerving around them, and sped out of town. I kept driving for what felt like hours, but no matter how far I went, I couldn't find my way back to the main road. Every turn I took brought me back to that same "Welcome to Ashwood" sign. By now, it was getting dark. The heavy feeling in the air grew worse, like the town itself was alive and didn't want me to leave. Desperate, I decided to stop at the gas station again and ask the attendant for directions. But when I pulled up, the station was completely dark. The windows were shattered, and the pump was rusted over, like it had been abandoned for years. I checked my phone, hoping to get a signal, but the battery, which had been at 70% earlier, was now completely dead. That's when I heard it. A faint whispering coming from the direction of the diner. The windows were dark, but I could see shadows moving inside. I didn't stick around to find out what they were. I jumped back in my car and started driving again, this time with no plan, no direction, just away. Eventually, the trees thinned, and I saw headlights in the distance. I followed them, and, to my relief, ended up back on a main highway. When I stopped at a rest area to catch my breath, I told a worker there about the town. She frowned and said, "There's no Ashwood around here. Closest town is 50 miles back." I pulled out my map to prove her wrong, but there was nothing. No Ashwood, no sign I'd ever been there. I don't know what I stumbled into that day, but one thing's for sure. If you ever see a town that feels wrong, trust your gut. Keep driving. Story 3. This story is about a New Year's tradition that went horribly wrong. You've probably heard of people making wishes or resolutions at midnight, but what if the thing you wished for didn't let you go? Let's dive in. This happened to me last New Year's Eve. I was at home, keeping it low-key, just watching movies and waiting for the ball to drop. Around 11:30, my best friend Rachel texted me a link to some New Year's superstition challenge. It was one of those chain message things, you know? The text said, "Want to see your future? At midnight, light a single candle, stare into a mirror, and make your wish. But be warned, don't look away until the candle burns out." Rachel and I always dared each other to do dumb stuff like this, so I decided to try it. It was harmless, right? I grabbed a small mirror from my bathroom and set it up on my coffee table. Then I lit a candle and turned off all the lights. The room was pitch black except for the flickering candlelight and my reflection in the mirror. As the countdown began on TV, I stared at myself in the mirror, trying not to blink. The room felt unnaturally still, like the air was thicker somehow. Midnight came, and I whispered my wish. It wasn't anything big, just that the new year would be better than the last. But as soon as the words left my mouth, something felt wrong. My reflection didn't blink when I did. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light or my imagination, but the longer I stared, the clearer it became. My reflection wasn't copying me anymore. It tilted its head, smiled, a smile I wasn't making, and mouthed something I couldn't hear. I froze, too scared to look away, remembering the warning. Don't look away until the candle burns out. The flame flickered violently, and I swear the room got colder. My reflection raised its hand on its own and pointed behind me. I didn't want to turn around, but I couldn't stop myself. Slowly, I glanced over my shoulder, and there was nothing there. Just the dark, empty room. But when I looked back at the mirror, my reflection was gone. The candle flickered again, and suddenly it went out. The room was plunged into darkness. I scrambled to turn on the lights, and when they came on, the mirror was shattered. But here's the thing, the cracks formed a shape. It looked like a face, smiling. The next morning, I texted Rachel to tell her about it. She swore she didn't send me the link, and when I checked my messages, the text was gone. No trace of it. Since then, I've avoided mirrors on New Year's Eve, because sometimes what stares back at you isn't you at all. Story 4. So, New Year's Eve, right? The one night we all wait for, full of fireworks, celebrations, and counting down to a fresh start. But what if the moment you've been waiting for turns into your worst nightmare? Yeah, that's exactly what happened to me. It was last New Year's Eve, and I was at my apartment alone. Nothing special. I wasn't really in the mood for partying, so I ordered some takeout and planned on watching the ball drop on TV. As the night went on, I started getting tired. Around 11:45, I decided to just go ahead and go to bed. The year had been rough, and I figured I could use a good rest to kick off the new one. I turned off the lights, crawled under the covers, and was just about to drift off when my phone rang. It was a blocked number. Now, I don't usually pick up blocked calls, but something made me answer this one. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was that feeling deep down that something wasn't right. I picked it up and said, "Hello?" For a second, there was nothing, just deafening silence. But then, I heard the faintest breathing on the other end, like someone was standing right there, watching, waiting. My chest tightened, and I called out, "Hello? Who's there?" The voice that came through next made my blood run cold. It was a woman, but her voice was shaky, full of fear, almost as if she was whispering through her teeth. "Look out the window." I felt a cold sweat break out on my skin, and a chill swept through me that made me freeze in place. This wasn't just some stupid prank, right? But I didn't want to believe it. Still, something about the way she said it made my heart pound in my chest, almost as if I was on the edge of a cliff, ready to fall into the unknown. I decided to just do it. I didn't know why, but something pulled me out of bed and made me walk toward the window. I pulled back the curtains just a little, and that's when I saw it. A shadow, standing right across the street, staring up at me. A tall figure, dressed in dark clothing, unmoving. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move, I couldn't think. I was paralyzed by fear. I froze, my mind racing, my body shaking with dread. There was no way anyone would be standing out there at this hour, especially in the middle of winter. My entire body was screaming at me to do something, but I couldn't. I quickly pulled the curtain back, trying to keep calm, trying not to make a sound, my hands shaking uncontrollably. My phone rang again. Same blocked number. I hesitated, then answered, almost too scared to speak. The voice came through again, this time softer, but somehow even more terrifying. "Don't worry, they're gone now." I hung up the phone as fast as I could, my hands trembling so badly I almost dropped it. My heart was racing. I didn't want to go back to that window, but after what felt like an eternity of hesitation, something inside me told me I had to check again. I pulled the curtain back again, my stomach in knots. Nothing. The street was empty, no shadow, no figure, just the usual quiet of the neighborhood. But my mind couldn't let go of what I had just seen. Was it all a trick, or was it worse than that? I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I thought it was over, but was it really? I looked down at my phone again and the screen flashed. I had one new message. I opened it, my hands shaking even more. The message was from an unknown number, and it simply said, "Happy New Year." I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I couldn't. Every sound made my heart race. Every shadow felt like it was watching me. The worst part? The number was the same as the blocked one. It was like it was all connected, a nightmare that wouldn't let me wake up. To this day, I have no idea who called me or why. But every New Year's Eve, I make sure to turn my phone off, lock the windows, and double-check the doors. Because sometimes, New Year's doesn't just mark a fresh start. It marks the beginning of something much darker, something that won't let go, no matter how hard you try to move on.